You're listening to Through the Square Window with me, Graham Kibble-White.
And me, Samira Ahmed.
Hello. This is a podcast guiding you through the UK television we watched in decades gone by, and this month we're looking at shows from July 1996.
So where were we in July 1996? Well, I was living in central London as a BBC News correspondent and preparing to head to a posting in the Los Angeles bureau. It was, I recall, an exciting, happy time with a real cool Britannia buzz around pop music, film and TV, though I have to say the bullying side of lad culture was definitely getting more overt.
That is true, whereas I was fresh out of university and working as a pot washer while fancifully imagining an exciting and fulfilling future in the world of TV journalism. I should add, in common with one of our programmes today, I was living in Glasgow at the time, and in common with another of our viewing selections, in a reasonably squalid flat share with a carpeted kitchen, towers of unwashed dishes and an ancient sofa with crusty arms.
I really daren't ask anything more, so let's discover what is coming up in today's episode.
Though there's still a sprinkling ban over half the country, the heavens chose to ignore it by cacking all over us.
It's my job to search for answers to some of the most curious and baffling cases.
I once lived with a woman and a man. We got on rather well.
You're talking about your parents, aren't you?
Good evening, bed poppers.
That was the Friday Night Armistice, Out of This World, Men Behaving Badly and Taking Over the Asylum.
But first, a rummage in the postbag, and our old pal, the culture journalist Paul Kirkley, has been in touch regarding our 1987 episode. He says, I will have to ask you to kindly stop trampling all over my treasured TV memories. First, the Mary Whitehouse experience, and breaking into Paul's comments here, I should explain we were a little disparaging about that show in our second episode, and he continues, The Ritz. I have very fond memories of watching this on Friday nights in the spring of 1987, although this is possibly as much to do with the fact that I watched it round at the house of a girl I really fancied as the programme itself.
That explains everything. Well, Paul continues, though, I trust both your judgments, though, so having heard that the show was, in fact, insufferable, I'm going to take your word for it and not revisit it to see for myself, though I do remember tuning in for the sequel, The Continental, and thinking it was rubbish. So maybe it wasn't the show that had changed in the intervening months, but me. It probably didn't help that by that time I was watching at home on my own. As listener, I never did get the girl.
Commiserations, Paul, but hopefully having your email read out 39 years later is some kind of recompense.
Well, our 1987 episode also touched on the US series Moonlighting. Writer Scott K. Andrews contacted us on Blue Sky to point out Moonlighting was beautifully shot on 35mm and was recently remastered in HD from the original film, fixing music and picture errors on the DVD releases. But you can't buy it on Blu-ray or iTunes in the UK. The only way to see it is on STV's streaming service with adverts. Surely a small run Blu-ray set release would sell. If Knight Rider can get a box set release, you'd think Moonlighting would too. The availability of old TV is such a patchwork of seemingly random choices. It's frustrating for those of us who care, and don't get me started on the state of cracker releases.
And finally, Graham Burke, the creator of the superb podcast series The Comics Code, also dropped us a line. He said, I was so excited by the fact that you had Moonlighting on the lineup for May's instalment, and then my heart sank when I realised it was going to be a season 3 episode. And my heart sank further when I realised it was going to be Blonde on Blonde, which started a storyline that moped around the will they won't they aspect of the show. I feel that's a shame, and I sort of wish the wheel had spun and gave you an episode from 1985 or 1986.
So interesting. Well, Graham goes on to say, nonetheless, a couple of things to mention for clarification. First of all, Glenn Gordon Caron didn't create Remington Steele. He was a breakout writer on the first season of that show. Secondly, the man who opens the door of Maddie's house, who played Maddie's lover, is actually played by Mark Harmon, who, as Graham said, at the time had just been named People magazine's sexiest man alive, which was a huge thing. But it wasn't just a cute metatextual nod, it was a thermonuclear bomb. They kept Mark Harmon's name out of the main credits at the start of the episode, and in fact put his credit just before Glenn Gordon Caron's producer credit at the end of the show. Nobody knew he was in the episode. I remember watching it when it first aired with my sister. I was 17, she was 16, and when Mark Harmon showed up, we both screamed out loud, who is going to be competition for David? Well, him. Suffice it to say, that landed a lot differently at the time. Harmon would also recur for the next several episodes, and it was never quite as impressive as that first door open. Thank you so much for that, Graham, putting it all in context.
It does make a difference. I mean, we're going back and looking at these things now, and sometimes it's great to hear from someone who was there in the moment.
It's like eyewitness history, the TV experience.
So if you'd like to hear Samira or me read out your thoughts on the podcast or the shows we've discussed, please do drop us a line on email at squarewindow.co.uk or find us on social media at Square Window Pod.
But now let's discover discussion as we take a look at our first show from 1996.
Though fighting's exciting, discover discussion, swap guns for tongue, and charm for concussion. Envelop your foes in one massive kiss and come to the Friday Night Armistice.
The Friday Night Armistice had begun in 1995 as the Saturday Night Armistice. Its second series moved in the schedules with an accompanying name change. Presented by Armando Iannucci with Peter Baynham and David Schneider, this was a satirical and sometimes surreal comedy show recorded on the night before transmission.
The episode we watched aired on BBC Two at 10 p.m. on Friday the 6th of July, set up essentially as a studio discussion show with pre-recorded reports on tape. It includes regular elements, Peter Baynham's miniaturised area, which purportedly showed unseen footage from public events, and Mr. Tony Blair, the Humpty-esque stuffed toy in the likeness of the then Labour leader. And of course this would have gone out then just immediately before Newsnight, wouldn't it?
Yes, that's true, which is actually quite canny scheduling for a Friday. I can't understand why it would ever have been a Saturday. I don't think people want satire on a Saturday night, do they anymore? Or would they in the 90s? It seems odd.
Well, do you know, the thing that watching this programme, like watching most of these shows from 1996, made me realise how much of these formats have just disappeared from broadcast British television. Any kind of satire show is just doesn't exist anymore, I don't think. And I noticed on this, the political consultant was Dom Jolly. It was co-written by some really significant comedy names, Arthur Matthews and Graham Linehan, who of course produced, they'd already created Father Ted by this point, hadn't they? Sarah Smith, who had a great pedigree in radio comedy, and the executive producer, that old stalwart of TV light entertainment, John Plowman. I was struck by how it was very packed. It had a sense of having been very carefully rehearsed for that as live impact.
Over here, I've got some of the millions of opinion pollsters literally straining at the leash to canvass their way round the country. Whoa! And I can now release them into the community.
And so within the first minute or so, you have a pack of pollsters straining to be let loose, front bench spokesman in a pit, old ladies making rosettes.
How many rosettes did you make last year?
10.
OK. How many are you going to make this year?
450,000.
Lots and lots of visual ideas, all very carefully staged. What did you think, Graham?
Yeah, I thought I did watch this, and I watched it pretty much religiously as well. And I remember loving it. I remember thinking, following on from something you said, it felt really tangible at the time that there was a kind of connected comedy scene. Other people in this, there's Mel Giedroyc and Sue Perkins also appear in this, Kevin Eldon.
Yes, I wrote all these names down, I know.
Yeah, it felt, even at the time, it felt like, oh wow, there's a whole kind of connected scene of people, working together and working on each other's projects in a kind of a way in the 70s when you think of the Pythons and the Goodies and so forth. So that was something that was really kind of tangible. I think this show, revisiting it now, I think it just about stays on the right side of being unbearably smug, and I think that's always a trap for satire, because you've got smart young men saying smart things as if they know best, and so that's always tricky. I think much of its success comes to the fact that the sheer creativity on display. So, for example, there's an ongoing joke which was running through the series about a busload of Princess Dianas, and we'd see them each week undertaking some kind of media-friendly civic engagement.
This week, since it's exam time, the Dianas went back to school. There they are. There's in they go.
They're going to exam rooms and talking to school children doing their GCSEs, and it's just, one, they all look perfect and they don't waste time. I mean, it's very tightly edited, and there's a great moment where one of the girls just goes,
Look, just go away.
I don't know, there's also something poignant, isn't there, at watching it, knowing that a year later Diana was to die in that terrible accident. So this is nearly a year before the general election, and it's the whole premise of it is, they're off and there's a whole pre-election buzz and how soon till the election's called, and there's a whole joke about, an epic advent calendar for the election.
And as the countdown begins, every home in the country will be sent one of these, their election advent calendars. Now, this, of course, is day one of the run-up, so let's see what's behind the first window. Here we are, number one. And it's a hospital bed.
And there's a joke about Michael Portillo's other daughter, which I think would be unimaginable now.
Let's open another one. How about behind here? Yes. This is Michael Portillo's other daughter. Now, we don't know about it as yet, but take it from me, this is going to be a big election issue.
There's a lot of jokes about politicians, which I can't imagine the BBC allowing, because there'd be complaints all the time from people.
I also wonder if politicians now aren't as recognisable characters in public life anymore, and I wonder if that's a barrier for satire shows, whereas Portillo, Blair... Do you disagree?
I think I disagree. I mean, obviously there's a show that's still running, like Have I Got News for You? And I think, things like Ed Davey and his stunts on social media are very recognisable.
That's true.
Obviously, BBC and broadcasters play a role in familiarity. I mean, if you put politicians on these satire shows, then you're, for those who don't know them, you're creating recognition. For those who do, you're reinforcing the recognition. But if you don't run these shows at all, then, you can sort of claim, well, they're not well known enough, but then you've contributed to that, I think.
That's true.
A bit of public service, I think, in having these shows. And the thing that, we always have these moments. Martin Bashir does a little cameo.
The studio is in permanent election standby. Once the date is called, I'll shatter this glass here, where it says break glass in case of election. I'll take out the hammer and break open this cabinet, and out will leap Panorama's Martin Bashir.
That's great.
Well, the thing is, he was known at the time, this has all emerged since, hasn't it, that he always seemed to be much more interested in getting himself onto these kind of other shows, and getting the self-promotion of him was quite striking even then. At a time when, news journalists were doing this occasionally, they had been for decades, but I think he was quite what's the word for it? I mean, the ego, I think, is very apparent that was driving him. And I think given what has emerged about him as a operator, yes, that is a painful thing to see him smugly smiling.
And this comes back to what you were saying about things happening so quickly, but with so much production in it. We talked about the Dianas, and this thing, they've got Martin Bashir in the studio. They've built a booth,
That's right.
And so they built the prop. They've got him in there, and it's just for like a 1 or 2 second joke, which I think is very commendable. Something else I wanted to add about it and the tone, and this thing I was saying about not being unbearably smug. I think the hosts themselves do quite well to contribute to that, because sometimes they are sniggering at their own hilariousness, but they're not presented as alphas, are they? They're all nerdy, and I think they're all a bit kind of anxious in themselves. None of them come across as winners particularly, and I think that's quite a good approach.
I do still find it, I know I say this every time, but I am still stunned that given all the great female comedy performers around at the time, some of whom have moments in this, they didn't find one woman to co-present the show. I mean, I just think that's pretty poor. But going back to the point about these really well delivered, very small skits that would cost time and money to film, there's a great moment about the Queen trying to get in on how Diana's very successful, going around being a kind of queen of people's hearts, and so the Queen comes in to watch surgery in a hospital in the way that I think Diana at the time had famously been photographed watching open heart surgery, and she's on a horse. I think it's Jeanette Charles, isn't it, under that face mask. There's also reference to the recent fiasco at the Euro 96 semi-finals and Gareth Southgate, and there's a big joke at his expense. So there's something quite fun about watching how unexpected their trajectories have been. Who would have thought Gareth Southgate would become this kind of great hero of the England football team again as a coach? There's a big extended joke about Danny Baker, which I didn't quite get. Was it just that he was considered ubiquitous at the time?
Cheap football cash-ins have started. And first out the bottom of the barrel is this amazing compilation video, Danny Baker's best short corners in the world ever. Containing 90 minutes of Danny Baker and top short corner action. Yeah,
this was kind of the peak of popularity around football, so he was the face of lots and lots of low-rent football VHS tie-ins.
Sublime. Maverick.
And it's nice to put together, isn't it? There's another edit thing, which I thought was really good, and I'm going to do the usual kind of the critic cliche now of saying that it's like a meme before its time, but this is the re-edit of Michael Burke's Not the 9 O'Clock News, so let's just have a listen to that.
Tony Blair's now upholding traditional Tory values. Tonight, a special report on the secret fascist group behind the Conservative Party conference. And Labour has beaten the world champions in the opening match of the Rugby League World Cup.
And so that's really clever. That's something else, isn't there, where someone has really put in the time.
Yeah, but I suppose because it looks quite realistic, you know, and again, I'm probably watching it with my Newswatch head on. I just think, oh my God, this is disinformation or misinformation. If someone watched that, they would think that's real, and it wasn't. And of course, it's the whole joke is that the BBC is blatantly biased in favour of Labour, and that they've got red roses appearing all over the set and things like that. And that's why I am genuinely stunned to think that the BBC was so calm about comedy in a way that I think is unimaginable now. I mean, the other thing they do is they go out vox popping outside Parliament, and part of it is, you know, and they're saying, you know, we're from the BBC, and they're basically implying that they're very pro-Conservative or very pro-Labour. And if they're not breaking the character, then they're actually saying to real MPs and to real members of the public, you're an idiot because you're not voting for this party. And again, it looks quite funny, but I couldn't help just worrying about, you know, the sort of due impartiality implications of that. Maybe that shows you how far I have absorbed all the current anxieties.
Yes, I was wondering if that was the case. This is a time when the BBC wasn't being attacked in the way it is now, I suppose, about, well, everything.
And there are lots of jokes about Prince Charles being, you know, skint because of the divorce. So they've got these kind of faked up videos where they're intercutting footage of him and then him lifting stuff from people's handbags.
Charles! Stop it!
I suppose that's more harmless because it's obviously not the case. There's also a couple of great jokes. There's a great one about the Tim Henman sex toys that go almost all the way.
Yes.
Once and for all, we're going to show the BBC is not biased. We're going to put the record straight today with a big statement on the other side.
Yeah, there was two other things I wanted to pick out. One was, which was such a thing you did in the pre-internet age, was the stunt where they go up onto the balcony of Television Centre, which I think is just outside the news round offices, and they lower a banner that says "Vote Tory."
Right, I think we should go.
We've made our point now.
And then they film it from the wide, and it's like, ha-ha. So people would have seen that and thought the BBC had put this banner outside the Television Centre. And it's a stunt that seems so of its time, and there's a sort of innocence about it, isn't there? The single best skit in this whole episode was the Association costume drama, where it was like a joke around, you know, football, and they're all in Jane Austen costumes.
And here come the teams, the Boston drama teams. To the lawn. Now, Association Costume Drama is a team of skill, flair, daintiness and dresses. So let the game commence.
Pray, my friend, take this post-haste to the opponent's goal. I shall, sir.
There's a captain.
And you get a yellow card with the word blackguard on it. There's a dancing scrum. It's exquisitely well delivered and written, I thought. That's my highlight.
What do you think about that element? Because there is a surreal side to this show, isn't it? And that is something they could have run any week, but it's kind of inventive as well. Is that part of the charm of Friday Night Armistice, the surreal humour?
Yeah, well, you talked about it kind of, you know, reminding you of an earlier ecosystem. I mean, this is very Monty Python, isn't it? It's like these philosophers playing football. So I think there's some brilliant, and it's a very middle class idea. Although you could argue now there's so much Jane Austen on the air. Actually, that a skit like that would ring true now. A lot of these things now exist only on radio. I think you can tell the radio roots of this. This is the kind of thing where they have found ways of doing visual comedy based on radio joke ideas, and that's part of what I really admire about this show.
And a density of those ideas.
I feel it was like there was a swagger in the BBC at the time. We were putting out these interesting shows. News and Current Affairs had a confidence, and the satire had a confidence, and it had a place on television. The two could coexist very happily, and I really miss that. Yeah, I'm feeling quite nostalgic now. Time now to take the cultural temperature of July 1996.
And in this month, the UK pop charts were dominated by Fugees' Killing Me Softly, the Spice Girls' Wannabe, Born Slippy by Underworld, Gary Barlow's Forever Love, and Peter Andre's Mysterious Girl featuring Bubbler Ranks.
Listeners to Radio 1 woke up to Chris Evans, while on Radio 2, Sarah Kennedy presided over the breakfast slot.
The box office draws at the cinema included the first instalments of 2 long-running franchises, Brian De Palma's Mission Impossible and John Lasseter's Toy Story. Plus there was Michael Bay's The Rock and Robert Rodriguez's From Dusk Till Dawn.
The hardback bestseller list for July included A Crown of Swords by Robert Jordan, Feet of Clay by Terry Pratchett, The Runaway Jury by John Grisham, Passionata by Gilly Cooper, and in a testament to the power of television, X-Files 4 Ruins by Kevin J. Anderson.
And finally, in the world of monthly and weekly publishing, Baddiel and Skinner appeared on the cover of Loaded magazine, Sean Ryder adorned Q, and Robbie Williams featured on Attitude. But perhaps more importantly, this was the month Beano Town became infested with mice in, of course, the Beano, and Desperate Dan opened a fine dining restaurant in the Dandy.
And I am sorry, but I did not write this line. While Desperate Dan's Eatery promoted bumptious cow pie consumption, our next programme deals with spontaneous human combustion. That was the opening music for Out of This World, and the very first episode, which aired on BBC One at 9:30pm on Tuesday the 23rd of July, marking TV's on and off obsession with the paranormal. This was a half-hour investigative-style show hosted by Carol Vorderman.
And as Samira mentioned, topics in this instalment included spontaneous human combustion, yes, but also the existence or otherwise of luck, and a haunted house in Wales.
It's basically Watchdog crossed with Arthur C. Clarke's Mysterious World, and I suspect that was the pitch. We've touched, actually, I realised twice before on our podcast so far, on paranormal shows. One was a panel show, Star Signs, which was about 1979, and then there was the much more serious take with a bunch of scientists and psychologists called A Leap in the Dark, which is presented by Colin Wilson. And this feels like it's not got the honesty to be just an entertainment. It's trying to be rigorous. It's got Chris Choi, the consumer journalist who was on BBC Watchdog. I knew him as the ITV's consumer affairs correspondent for many years. And it's so utterly boring. You know, he goes to the site of these combustion incidents and he's just looking at a modern kitchen with a police officer talking about what was on the floor. You might get to see an odd photograph now and then. And he'll be sitting behind a pile of old leather-bound books looking at photographs on a primitive laptop. But it was just... I lost the will to live, I have to say, Graham, watching this.
I have to report, so the first thing I need to report about this are the opening titles, which are rubbish, and very 90s, and that kind of obsession with everything sort of being blue and bluey lit, and I think that's kind of the one would call the X-Files flashlight aesthetic. But the opening titles essays a range of related words, all in different and equally nasty typefaces, and I'm particularly fascinated by some of these being singular, some being plural. But Samira, let me give you all the words that appear in the titles, which are mysteries, reincarnation, apparition, poltergeist, prophecies, spirits, ghosts, vanishing, haunting, ley lines, psychics, UFO, and also aliens. So I like this. It's kind of someone spitballed just words that I guess we want to see.
Good evening and welcome to a brand new series, Out of This World.
It's notionally hosted by Carol Vorderman, and that element really annoys me because she's akin to Evan Davis on Dragon's Den, and it's clear her contributions have been culled from a day's filming in an old house, and she's probably never met any of the show's other participants nor seen any of the reports that she's queuing up for us. And she does that old kind of canard of,
can science provide the answer?
Which is such a hoary old proposition. And here it means that fanciful tales of paranormal activity are relayed like a hot point item on, well, yeah, Watchdog, as you said. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the producer David Morgenstern came from Watchdog. And I think it's just everything they deal with is so intangible that the format reacts against it. And I think there must have been lots of discussions in the edit suite or when they're trying to get these pieces together, what are we going to actually see on camera? Because as you say, we see shots of kitchen floors, or it's so dull looking, isn't it?
I know, there's a great bit where there's a scene of one of those spontaneous combustions, which was an old lady, and they actually have a discussion about the fact that there was an Aga in there and whether or not there would have been an issue about electricity supply. And you thought, well, you'd be better off if this were just an episode of Watchdog. I did quite like that they had some interesting experts who sadly you never really get to know. So there's Larry Arnold, a former US engineer and author of Ablaze with an exclamation mark.
Some of these instances can best be explained as chemical processes in the body going haywire.
He talks about people turning into a human Hiroshima, exploding from the inside out. And I thought, these Americans have a great turn of phrase, but he needed to be in a format that took it more seriously. And I also really thought that this is a show which shows you how we needed the internet, or we needed to go back to an earlier day, because it's trying to bring a sense of we're investigating this live. And there's even a pointless promise to keep the phone lines open after the programme goes off air, even though the whole programme is just a sequence of taped and edited reports. But, there are vaguely, you get to see occasional grainy photographs of autopsy scenes, or scenes that have been shown at a coroner's inquest, where you can see there are some human feet in a pile of ash, and it's grainy enough that you can't quite make out any human detail, but it's you need to see it properly on a computer screen, don't you, and kind of dive into the internet and go full conspiracy theory with this if you're going to do it properly.
It should be more prurient in a way, shouldn't it? And I think this, because it's a very 90s BBC way of dealing with it. And, I've said it posits the question, can science find the answers? And the answer to that is always no, it can't. And so I think it should have more fun with it, with the subject matter in a way, and sort of lean into it.
They don't know how to have fun, do they?
No.
They don't know how to have fun. And I think, having said earlier that there was something about a kind of great swagger and confidence about news and current affairs at this time, and then its relationship with satire, there was, I think, a kind of mistaken swagger about, everything should be like Watchdog, because Watchdog is a great format, and we've reviewed Watchdog in the past. And in its peak, it's the most fantastic thing, because it's dealing with facts. It's not trying to pretend to bring scientific rigour to something which is much more complicated. And you don't really know the full story. There's a couple who are haunted in their country house and obviously having quite a tough time, and I kind of feel for them. They probably thought, well, let the BBC in and they'll help us with this, and the BBC aren't really going to sort anything. They're just trying to fill half an hour, and it's got the deadly hand of too many producers and editors say, oh God, we've got to make this more interesting, and let's extend it a bit more, and let's do an edit here, and it just feels overproduced and under interesting.
And I think, taking that argument further, you get this, it just gets very convoluted. It wraps itself up in, did this really happen? Or maybe it didn't. Oh, science has got an answer. Actually, it hasn't got an answer.
So to the scientists, most say there is no mystery, that it's all been explained by what they call the wick effect. In other words, the victim's clothes catch fire and behave like a wick. As body fat melts, it acts like the wax. The theory doesn't explain how the fires start in the first place.
Because it never wants to, it always equivocates all the way through, because it would be irresponsible for them to say, yes, there are ghosts, or it would also be frankly bizarre. But it just means it's just half an hour of fence sitting, as it wants to take you through these permutations of what may or may not have happened. And it makes it really, really, really unsatisfying. And I think, if I may be so bold, the person who is the totemic of this is Dr. Richard Wiseman, Professor of the Public Understanding of Psychology at the University of Hertfordshire.
Our research assesses both psychological and parapsychological explanations for luck. So we consider the possibility that people might be kidding themselves, that luck doesn't exist, it's just in literally the mind of the beholder. We also take seriously the possibility that it might be true, it actually exists, and some people are truly luckier than others.
And he is an absolute past master in providing no resolution whatsoever. And he does, for example, an experiment funded by the Leverhulme Trust, which is to see if luck actually exists. And you have footage of someone sat there looking at a computer doing coin tossing, and they have to guess, if it's going to be heads or tails. It's so boring.
Next, we move to a story from Brecon in Powys. Bill and Liz Rich have rented their remote cottage for the past 7 years, and throughout that time have suffered a number of harrowing experiences. In this film, they tell their own story, and the images are an accurate depiction of what they say appeared.
There's the ghost story, which is sort of the big production number in this. I think the storytelling here is so poor that I actually was very uncertain what this couple had ever experienced. It's so strange. And at one point, you're talking about these contributors. We have Baptist Minister David Homewood, who advises us.
Bill and Liz had allowed things to come into their life which were not Christian.
I mean, what can we learn? It's just such these things.
Well, this is the thing you wanted either to dive into that wholeheartedly and say let's go down that occult line and let's freak me out a bit, or it just needs to dismiss it, and it does neither. It wastes everyone's time.
And you have here the old fallacy which you get in all these ghost stories, which is people looking in the history books about where they lived to find a record of someone who's died in nasty circumstances. And if you're living in a farmhouse that's hundreds and hundreds of years old, if you research long enough, you're going to find something.
Well, you say that. I'd be really terrified to research my house now in case I find something scary.
But there will be, Samira. I'm sorry to say it. If you want to go looking for it, I think it's going to be there. And then this is made to sound as if it's a plank to an argument that, oh gosh, well, okay, yeah, now we found there was a murder there, so there must be a ghost.
Well, can I just say that when my parents bought this house in 1973, there was a statue of a dog in the garden. It's still there, and I'm guessing there's a dog buried underneath it. I'm starting to think of The Omen now.
We're changing direction of this podcast now. It's going to turn into an investigative piece about...
If I get killed, Hand of the Baskerville style, you'll know it's the dead dog in my garden that's come out and got me.
Well, maybe we should send Chris Choi around.
See, this is more interesting than that episode of Out of This World, was it not? TV news now, and in July 1996, Coronation Street and EastEnders ruled the ratings with 14.6 million viewers for the former and 13.5 for the latter. ITV's The Bill was also performing strongly with around 11.5 million viewers, while Men Behaving Badly, which we're coming to shortly, notched up 11.33 million. Emmerdale just inched over the 11 million mark, and the BBC's National Lottery Live enjoyed a figure of 10.7 million. What numbers we're talking about, Graham. This is still a golden age for ratings.
Yeah, it is. So, talking of the lottery, the BBC's coverage was criticised by the Shadow Heritage Secretary Jack Cunningham, who said it didn't give enough information about how grants were spent. Meanwhile, the corporation announced the coming of a second midweek lottery show in the autumn.
Newly launched weekly teen soap Hollyoaks came off the air for the summer, but would return in September in a new twice-weekly format. This was despite disappointing viewing figures, but Channel 4 said, "We are confident that the number of Hollyoaks viewers will increase. The show isn't doing badly, it just got off to a bumpy start." Plus, it was announced Coronation Street would sprout a fourth episode from November. Can I just say about Hollyoaks, just the... a TV channel sticking by its producers and saying, we're confident, and giving it a chance to grow. I mean, where's that attitude now?
It's very, very unusual. So ITV revealed it was investing 20 million into its autumn drama season. Heading the lineup was a £2.5 million adaptation of Moll Flanders, written by Andrew Davies and starring Alex Kingston. More Davies productions were also on the way, his take on Emma, starring Kate Beckinsale, and a third adaptation, Wilderness, a gothic love story of a woman who transforms into a wolf, which would star Dutch-Swedish actor Amanda Ooms. Plus, there was news of an ITV Poldark TV movie, which would go on to draw opprobrium from fans by replacing the leads from the BBC series, recasting Ross Poldark with John Bow and Demelza with Mel Martin.
No substitute for Robin Ellis, as far as I'm concerned. And an edition of the South Bank show followed the fortunes of a 21-year-old Bolton actress, a certain Maxine Peake, during her first year at RADA. I have to confess that Maxine reminded me of the precocious would-be actress in the wicked Channel 4 cartoon Crapstone Villas, wrote the TV critic of The Stage, Ollie Wilson, reviewing the show. Oh, what classless attitudes endured at the time.
OK, lager can ring pulls on standby. It's time for our next show. So, the theme tune to Simon Nye's hugely successful sitcom Men Behaving Badly. The episode under our scrutiny comes from the show's 5th series and is titled Your Mate v Your Bird. It aired on BBC One at 9 p.m. on Thursday the 11th of July.
Men Behaving Badly starred Martin Clunes and Neil Morrissey as laddish flatmates Gary and Tony. While the former is in a relationship with Caroline Quinton's Dorothy, the latter permanently lusts after their neighbour Debs, played by Leslie Ash.
In this episode, Gary has invited Dorothy to move into the flat, and upon doing so discovers that both his relationships with her and best friend Tony have immediately suffered.
Meanwhile, Tony is trying to think of a way to illustrate his devotion to Debs.
What did you make of Men Behaving Badly?
I was very aware of this programme and being a huge rating thing. I never watched it. I used to stumble across bits of it. It always looked very slapsticky. But I always had great affection for the actors, particularly Caroline Quinton, Neil Morrissey, who I think has got very puppy dog sweetness about him, and Martin Clunes has got that kind of great comic face. There's something of Frasier about the whole premise of this episode, isn't there? The way that Frasier's brother Niles was obsessed with who was the carer?
Daphne.
And there was that whole, will they, won't they? So there's a bit of a vibe of that. I guess it struck me as having something in common with Friends as well, in that the Martin Clunes character is a bit like Chandler, and that whole sense of the four of them and their kind of different interrelationships and all that. But it was very broad, and the other thing I liked was the violence in it, which I thought, in a way it was quite refreshing. It had a bit of a Young Ones kind of Rick Mayall, Adrian Edmondson feel to it. There are these fantasy sequences where you don't realise it's a dream at first.
Just give me the knife, Tony.
What have you done?
And then you realise, it's a dream, and he wakes up from the dream. That kind of comedy at 9:30 on a BBC One, I think, showed you that whole, it's not just laddish, there's something a bit more sort of generally confident, isn't there, about rule-breaking comedy, which at the time probably was just great. I think now it would be very problematic. I know that ROSPA, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents, used to complain a lot, I think, about this show and the irresponsibility of the japes. But it was definitely of its time, I would say. Did you watch this, Graham?
Yes, I did actually watch this. It's interesting what you're saying about the kind of pushing the boundaries, because eventually the series bowed out with some festive episodes, 3 in 1998. And at that point, I think there was a joke in one of them about masturbation, and there was lots of complaints at that point. This kind of, maybe that's the sea change where people start thinking, this kind of laddishness is no longer appropriate. We don't want that. Not at Christmas time. No, certainly not.
Oh, yeah.
I feel that with this, we're now halfway through the show's 5th series, and it's 3rd on BBC One because BBC acquired it from ITV after 2 series there, and then the producer Beryl Virtue, when ITV cancelled it, very kind of cannily brought it to the BBC, and it was a massive success.
Yeah.
But I think it feels a bit tired, even though this is now the show at the peak of its popularity.
And it won an RTS, I think, this year as well, didn't it?
Yeah. All the characters just feel a bit kind of fed up, or certainly Martin Clunes' Gary is definitely kind of fed up.
You see, living with your birds, all very well, but in a funny kind of way, I could liken it, Tone, to living with your parents.
And you can almost hear the show's format groaning against the changes that the writer Simon Nye is attempting to put it through. And I feel it's starting to become, in all the relationships, it's starting to become too complicated. And for a show riding on the 90s prevailing attitude of blokishness, or that idea of a man-child and not giving a toss, I think it's asking us to care too much about it. The other thing that I felt watching it now, and it's I watched every episode when it went out, so I didn't miss it. But it's one of those programmes where I haven't rewatched it. I never went back to it. But so rewatching it now, I really feel there's like a divide in the cast. So you've got Martin Clunes and Caroline Quentin, who are 2 performers who are excellent at sardonic humour. They're both quite cerebral and charismatic. And then you have Neil Morrissey and Leslie Ash. And Neil Morrissey's sort of got the energy of a Saturday morning children's show presenter, which is helpful because it does go some way to neutering Tony's kind of borderline sex pest behaviour.
Come in for a cup of tea.
No, I'd rather not.
A mug of water?
No.
A cracker and some jam?
Really,
Please, spend some time with me.
And you've got Leslie Ash, and she's similarly energised, but her character Deb's she doesn't ever feel real.
No, she doesn't, does she?
And whether she's a lust object or someone interested in bettering herself through education, which is what happens to her later, they just don't let her be funny or mysterious or interesting. And is that the writing, maybe? Is that her performance? I'm not sure.
I think it's both. I mean, this episode, she's talking about signing up to, go to university. And there's a big thing about when she says, he says, you're looking at leaflets. She says, no, it's a prospectus. And you think, that's a line in the script. I mean, why bother? I did like the fact that the character that Caroline Quentin plays as a nurse, there's something about grounding that. I like the fact that the body types, they're very real. They're not sort of super toned American glamour people. And I noticed that there was a US remake that was cancelled after 2 series, and the cast included Jason Bateman. But it's not The Office, is it? There's something fundamentally not that original about the idea of it. It's just the timing in which it was made. Obviously, it took off. But it's like all those sitcoms. There was, what was it, Robin's Nest or The Live Birds, that idea of a sitcom which is about flatmates. And I just think the Americans, if this has been an American idea, I think it would have been much better. I think this could have been something like The Big Bang Theory, where if you think about it, it's a bunch of geeky men in flat chairs, and there's a gorgeous neighbour next door who would be like the Leslie Ash character. You can just see how well you can do a sitcom where you're lusting after your neighbour, and you can do it with class, and you can do it with humour. And somehow I was surprised as well, given that it was produced by a woman, by Beryl Virtue, that and she'd obviously cared enough about it to take it to the BBC and get it to be a success there, that it isn't better. I just thought it would be better when I watched it for the first time.
Do you mean just generally better, or do you mean better for women?
But both. I mean, I just thought, to be a woman in comedy, I just feel you always have to work harder to get anywhere. And to have made this a success, it has two women, two men in it. And Caroline Quinton, of course, is such an important actress. I was just underwhelmed is the word I'm looking for. I think underwhelmed.
Okay, that's interesting. So, as I said at the start, the episode's called Your Mate v Your Bird. And Martin Clunes has to sometimes talk about my bird.
George, I can't go on living with Tony and Dorothy. One of them's got to go. How do you decide between your best mate and your bird?
It never sounds right coming out of his mouth, does it? No, that never sounds like something he would naturally say. That even that character that Gary would say referred to Dorothy as my bird.
Do you think it's like BBC trying to sound ITV?
It might be. And I do think, though, as much as I said I think this starts to feel tired, I do feel that Neil Morrissey and Martin Clunes' relationship really works well. I think there's a kind of juvenile bonhomie between the two men.
So, mate, what have you been up to?
Oh, not much. Got a kebab, watched a documentary about how housewives are turning to stripping to make ends meet, drank some lager,
Pretty successful evening, then.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Textbook evening. What have you been doing?
Sweating.
Oh, well, that's something to do, isn't it?
And almost to the point, there's something quite sweet about them both and their devotion towards each other, and how heartbroken they are at the idea that maybe that Tony's going to have to move out now that Dorothy's moved in. I thought that was kind of quite touching. But did you find any of it funny?
Yeah, there was one joke I really liked, which was...
What's the matter? Was the European Court of Human Rights banned farting?
I thought that was quite a good line. But I was, I just felt the whole thing felt... For all the promise of men behaving badly, they're never really behaving that badly.
No.
It felt like it was going through the motions.
Did you find it offensive?
No, not really. I just didn't think it was... It didn't seem realistic enough to be offensive. As I say, I just thought they were trying using words like bird versus mate. It felt like it was lifting the jargon of Loaded magazine, but it just felt like it was performative, is the word I would use. But, I have to say, I do remember this period very well, and the swagger and the arrogance and the whole kind of Chris Evans making his posse eat, spaghetti made out of human hair kind of bullying. That was the culture at the time. So in comparison to that, this is pretty tame.
Yeah, and actually I would say in comparison to that, this verges on good-hearted.
It is good-hearted, and I'll forgive it. And as I say, I really like the performers in it. I really love Neil Morrissey's hangdog expression. It's very cute.
So on to our final programme for this episode as we turn our dial to St Jude's Hospital Radio.
The Rolling Stones' 19th Nervous Breakdown, ushering in the first episode of Takin Over the Asylum, which was written by Donna Francis Child and actually debuted on BBC Two back in September 1994. However, it began this repeat run in 1996 from the Saturday the 13th of July on BBC Two at 10 p.m. And there is a whole story about the fact that I think this was its only repeat, and the writer of it has got lots of things to say about that, but we'll talk about that in a bit.
Yes, so the drama is set in Glasgow and tells the story of a would-be radio DJ, Ready Eddie McKenna, played by Ken Stott, who's taken on a pitiful job as a double-glazing salesman. Dropped from his regular evening hospital radio gig, he's invited to relaunch a long-abandoned station at St Jude's Psychiatric Hospital.
And there he meets David Tennant's frenetic Campbell Bain, Katie Murphy's profoundly depressed Francine Boyle, and the mysterious Nana, played by Mary McLeod, who in this first episode is thought to be speaking in tongues.
So I lived in Glasgow round about this kind of time, so it's quite nostalgic looking at this programme now and kind of trying to reverse engineer, as one does, where some of it is shot. So for example, that the the double glazing company is shot on Partick Bridge Street in the West End of Glasgow, for example. But the reason I'm bringing up this is it feels so lived in. Yeah. It's such a great show. You really get a sense of the place. All the time you're hearing trains clattering by.
Oh, you can say maybe to a terrier all you like, but they never let go.
You're hearing buildings sort of groan as they naturally do. Eddie is wearing a Mayfest 89 t-shirt, which is exactly what his character would be wearing. And the asylum is shot at a real-life Gartlock Mental Hospital, which is just outside the city. There's just so much investment in this and confidence in the show, I think.
I know. I thought it was astoundingly good and beautifully shot. I found a lovely interview from 2008, and the writer talked about the weeks we spent filming it were some of the happiest and most glorious of my life, cooped up for days at a time in a disused wing of Gartlock Mental Hospital on the outskirts of Glasgow. The cast, crew and the regular extras who played the other patients in the hospital grew into a real community. The regular extras were mainly comprised of ex-patients, and they kept us firmly grounded. When I thought Kenny Bryans, who was playing the nursing assistant, was being a bit too vicious, one of the extras said, "Oh no, he's got it exactly right." There was a real sense of purpose that I've never experienced again on a film set, but also a real sense of fun. The editor back in London was thrilled as the raw footage came in. "You are creating your own world up there," he enthused, and we were. There are sequences where he starts his first show on the radio station in this mental hospital, and the camera is suddenly looking down from the ceiling above a door and watching a patient come out of her room, and she's aware of it on the tannoy. And I just thought the angles on this, the way it was shot, the way it was edited together, even if you think, oh, I know how well television's edited now, this really was exquisitely put together, I thought.
But there ain't no cure for the summertime blues.
That was Summertime Blues, and this is Ready Eddie McKenna.
What do you think about the way it deals with mental health? Because I've also read that interview, and I think one of the things about it is you mentioned that it wasn't repeated ever on BBC One. It was the first drama on BBC Two to be focus group because the corporation was so worried about the mental health element of this, and reportedly Alan Yentop, the controller of BBC One, had said he would never have a drama on his channel with the word asylum in the title. But it's quite punchy, isn't it, about aspects of mental health, and I think in a way that hasn't dated. I think that side of it is quite strong.
Yes, I do. So I'll put up front what troubles me about it, which I think is not what's dated, but just shows you how times are different, which is the way that all these men and women are just wandering around together, and there's no sense of protecting the women from men who might be sexually predatory, which we know is a real issue now. But the range of issues, so there's the woman who they think is speaking in tongues, but as Eddie notices, she's wearing a crucifix. He says, well, she's Catholic and they wouldn't tend to. And of course, it turns out that she's Latvian, she speaks no English. And when her daughter died, she was just brought into the hospital and they're finally going to get her out. And of course, it's sort of simple as that, as we find out to the end of the episode where he encounters her living on the street. But of course, the big breakout is the amazing performance by David Tennant as this manic depressive, I think he is, isn't he?
It's Campbell Bain as the character, yeah.
Aye, it was brilliant. Sort of like a Levi's, Wrigley's, Pepsi and Iron Brew advert all rolled into one. Young girl, get out of my mind, you never close your eyes. Fame! No.
Did anyone else listen?
Well, I don't think so. Unless you count Agnes, a nurse sat her next to one of the speakers.
And it's a star-making turn. I mean, he's done interviews, hasn't he, where he said every role he's ever been offered since, to some extent, has drawn back to that's what people remember. And it's such an exquisite, charming performance. But I don't know. I mean, I worry a little about would some of those issues look slightly trite, the way that everyone has a different health issue and the way that they are treated. But I think there's something just humane and warm and earnest about this show that I trust. I trust the writer. I trust the performers. I don't think anyone's trying to over-dramatise mental illness, nor are they trying to sugarcoat it. And the story's genuinely interesting. And one thing I was interested in, because he's playing all this music, and a lot of it's Beatles music, and of course they had to re-record all the tracks because
it's all sound alikes,
yeah.
Following what we were saying about the kind of the quirks of the characters, there is something about this, and I watched this when it first went out. I also watched the repeat, and so I love watching it again for this. But I think the storytelling is a bit simplistic.
You do,
but not in a way that really bothers me. So they sort of give Eddie a problem of the week to resolve, don't they? And which he does. And so, as we mentioned, there's Nana. He resolves that, and the patients in this hospital all have a quirk, and it's like a character quirk, which is a bit simplistic, I suppose. And then the main overriding plot of this is a group of misfits working together to create something. And it occurred to me that that's often the business of children's drama. And yes. I think this shows it's a really hard-working and satisfying narrative. And I like the fact that, akin to a children's drama, also the common endeavour here is really small scale, which is running a hospital radio channel. But it becomes the biggest thing in everyone's lives. And I like that. It feels little but kind of huge. And I think it's really satisfying. And I don't think you get that sort of storytelling now anymore. Slightly naive, but in a good way, if that's possible.
Well, I think, again, it's going back to something I think that's emerged unexpectedly through reviewing these shows, which is you think the 1990s and 1996 is kind of peak pre-Cruel Britannia, isn't it? And there's much more confidence, and you've got working class heroes like the Gallagher brothers and Oasis. But actually, writing that genuinely putting working class stories centre stage is not getting the attention it would. This show won 2 BAFTAs, including Best Drama Serial. It won an RTS for Best Writer, but it only got this one repeat. Donna Frances Child did a stage production in 2013. I found an interview she did with Socialist Worker online about a subsequent series she wrote called The Keys, about Glasgow working class women. And it just feels like there was never enough of an interest in telling these kinds of stories to give her, follow-ups, which, any writer who wins something like this with a series, you'd think people should be queuing up to say, what do you want to do next? Said we get more and more period dramas.
Yeah, it does seem odd that she's not still a big player in television today.
She's making a lot of radio dramas. I looked at what she's doing, and she is writing dramas, but she should be up there as the way that people like Jack Thorne and James Graham are getting commissioned all the time. She apparently said that because the show never got repeated properly and it never got proper DVD release, BBC had no interest. It was rediscovered after someone put it up on YouTube in 10-minute chunks, and she was really grateful.
Slight change of subject, but I have to nominate my favourite character here.
Go on.
And it's Mr. Gordon Griffin, Eddie's boss at Twin View Windows, who's played by Roy Hanlon. And I just think he is fantastic. Let's listen to a little bit of him now.
And do you know how I got to be where I am today?
I don't know, Mr. Griffin.
I never accepted a maybe. And that's my advice to you, McKenna. It's a dog-eat-dog world out there. And do you know what kind of dog you need to be?
No.
Go on, guess.
I don't know.
Then guess.
An Alsatian?
A terrier. Have you ever kept a terrier?
No, sir.
Dreadful dogs. Never keep a terrier. That's my advice to you. And do you know why you should never keep a terrier?
I don't know much about dogs.
They bite your ankles, McKenna, and they never let go.
And what I like about him so much is he's so kind of fruity. And he's so seemingly benign in the way he's trying to, he's trying to encourage Eddie, and he tells a long story about, what kind of dog should he be? He should be a terrier.
Yes.
But there's this kind of baseline of implacability about him that, he will not stop. And he is the stuff of nightmares if you want a boss who is just going to be on your case all the time. And maybe that really worked for me because, as I said, at this time, I was living in Glasgow and I was working in a very awful job. And so it really kind of, to use the R word, resonated with me. But I just loved him. I thought he was great. Yes. And I have to say, I think he overshadows David Tennant. I think he's the standout from this show.
He is such a great, fully formed character with his voice and everything, and the way he obviously is like a Shakespearean actor who's appeared in their midst. No, you're right. But there's something so touching about David Tennant's earnestness. And his enthusiasm and his floppy hair. He looks so 90s.
Yes.
Oh, well, I thought the other thing that's interesting is what the author said, which is the BBC put the first episode out originally against live European football on BBC One and Soldier on ITV, which was then one of the most popular programmes on television. We expected to sink without trace. So I like that there is a sense of this programme succeeding despite the best attempts of those in charge and senior management to try and bury it.
It's sort of living its own narrative in a way, isn't it? They are the plucky misfits who have this common endeavour, which they're doing despite the institution where they're working. It's very strange that art is reflecting life in terms of this programme.
Yeah. And the performances and the naturalness of them. I mean, Ken Stott, it's a familiar face, but I couldn't name you things he'd been in. But there's something really moving and lovely about his performance, and the fact that the whole thing hasn't tried to glamorise them in a way that it would if it was trying to do it as a film.
Yeah, and he's living with his mum, and it's a really small point, but I really love the fact that he totally comes alive when he's DJing and when he's doing his Ready Eddie Roadshow and all this kind of stuff.
Ready Eddie's Roadshow, Ready Eddie go. That's right, this is the premiere, this is the first, and you can tell everyone that you were there, you heard it, you saw it, and they'll tell you it's all part of your illness.
We're playing requests from Ward 11 this evening. The first one is for Francine. I hope you're listening, Francine.
Because often in these programmes, they sort of fall apart when they do the thing, and it just seems a bit crap and a bit naff. But here, it's pitched perfectly, isn't it?
And that's what feels real, that, you recognise putting your soul into something that might seem quite small in the grand scheme of things, but it's where your passion lies, and it is the distraction from, as you say, his day job. I think that resonates with me as well, the idea of you find an escape through the hobby.
That's almost it for today as we reach close down, but first, let's hear about next month's podcast.
In the next episode, Graham and Samira will be going through the square window with me, Joy Whitby, the creator of Play School and Jackanory, to talk about my 60-plus years in children's television.
Graham and I visited Joy back in March, and I should say I've been to see her since we did the recording, and she enjoyed it so much, and she was telling me how with Play School, which is arguably her most famous creation, she wrote every aspect of the opening title sequence of that show, and the original show she wrote in rhyming couplets, and there's so many wonderful memories that I think we got out of her. We think it's a really special episode and you'll enjoy it.
And remember, if you'd like to drop us a line about anything to do with the podcast, you can reach us on email at squarewindow.co.uk or look up Square Window Pod on social media. But for now, goodbye.
Thanks for listening to Through the Square Window.
This was a Square Window production with music by local teenagers.
Our logo was designed by Stuart Manning.
Do subscribe and tell other people about us, and if you're inclined, please do leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts.